They don't. So, some historical black Indians include Crispus Attucks, Paul Couffae, Frederick Douglass, John Horse, Morning Dew, Edmonia Lewis, John Mercer Langston, Mace Reeves, James Beckworth, Moses Harris, no relation, Langston Hughes, Josephine Baker, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, James Earl Jones, Larry Fish, lots of folks. Yes?
So, what quantum, it was never, an issue to Native Americans. Why is it such a big deal that you have to have a certain amount of blood now to be considered Native American, to say get benefits and stuff like that?
Why it is now?
Is it just government?
It's basically, the meme, if you will, originated in Africa and was applied to horses, not to human beings. Because there's no point in counting after half. Because even at half, you can have, if your mom and dad are black and white respectively, the kid can be blonde-haired and blue-eyed because that's in the genome, right? And then you can have darker kids show up later. We've even had the phenomenon of, two black people from Jamaica living in Britain, looking like me, and having 4 or 5 blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids in a row. I'm not making that up. That's a news item. So that's the genetics, right? So that's the science. It doesn't really matter biologically. Your genes are going to express if they're there. Shouldn't matter what your appearance is. But what happened as part of conquest is that these divide and conquer strategies were used, and one of them was the idea of separating people out according to race. Now that didn't exist before Europeans got here, because there was contact among some Europeans, some Africans, some Asians, and that's why this construct of 4 races existed. Oh, we know these people, and they're coming from, the people of the East came from out of the East, and the people of the South came from, Africa, right? That's what Taino told Columbus. These black guys came from South. How do they know that? Well, why not East? But they said South. So, this is basically among Native America. So what happened is, in order to get recognition, federal recognition, they had to do some deals. Right? And so one of those was you have to expel your black members. And there's a political reason for that too, that we'll see happening in Oregon. And I'll show you that in actually a second. So black Indians. So part of why they did that is they didn't believe in blood quantum originally, but they were forced to practice it to gain certain advantages.
So basically, if there isn't, if they had to have some sort of blood quantum, down to a 16th, I know you don't get benefits after that.
Right.
So it's a government thing. It's
right.
not okay.
Right. It was imposed by the government. Right, and the construct came from Jefferson. Through Jefferson, and Jefferson just modified the construct that came from Africa, because, if nobody counts after half, why even bother going to 1/64th? And the implication is, you're black even if you're 1/64th, but you're not native after 1/16th. Is black blood stronger than native blood? Is that what you're saying? No, so if you try and follow the logic, no, it doesn't even make mathematical sense. But it's basically different political policies. We want to keep you black to keep you from voting. We want the Native Americans to disappear completely as quick as possible. And then they just refine that game for the Hawaiians, saying, okay, you're no longer Hawaiian after half. You're quarter Hawaiian, no land rights. Oh, is Hawaiian blood the weakest? No. See, it's about power. So that's why racial constructs are usually about power and how you distribute it. Some can conceptualize it where it's equal distribution for everybody, if you exist, and some can concentrate power in the hands of few. Look, White people are not the first people to create racial supremacy. They're not. In Asia, they've been doing it for a long time, way longer than white people have had civilization. So you could make a case for saying that Asian people are more racist than white people because they've been doing it for longer and there are more of them. But we don't talk about that context here because it's not the rules that we're working under. And we've only been working under those rules for 700 years. So, and that's just basically in what we call the Western world. So a lot of people have basically adopted that game too. So modern black Americans include Christopher Judge, who was the former Duck, who's Teal'c in Stargate. Della Reese, Willie Stargell, James Earl Jones, Sally Richardson, Whoopi Goldberg, Tina Turner, Eazy-E, Michael Jackson, Jimi Hendrix. Oh, there's a lot of us. Basically, easily 1/3 of black America has some degree of Native American blood in it. So this is Paul Coufet. Let's see, I want to jump actually. This will be available for you. Okay. So that's Paul Coufet, famous black Indian in colonial times. This is Moses Harris. That's him on the left. He was thought to have been born around 1800 in Union County, South Carolina, but there's no real record. And was believed to be a freed slave. He made many fur hunting expeditions between St. Louis and the Rocky Mountains in the early 1830s. He spoke the Snake language very well, among other things that was documented. The idea, what I2M Eugene is a multicultural history project that my partner Sherry Turpin and I created, basically looking at, people talk about, well, what is the local history of people of color in Oregon? Well, some people can say, well, there isn't any. And, Sherry, sitting in the library, not even on a computer, found tons of stuff. So what? The professional historians at the U of O couldn't look in their own library? What? What's up with that? So, he basically, his connection to Eugene is he and the Applegate family basically pioneered this area in terms of making first contact with a lot of native folks, Kalapuya. These are from several books that basically describe him, for example, escaping from the Blackfeet. He was quite a storyteller. So the declining fur trade meant the end of one career for him. He acted as a guide for one of the largest immigrant trains to come to Oregon in 1844. The party divided into 3 sections, which included a wealthy black man named George Bush, and Michael T. Simmons, John Minto, Nathaniel Ford and his family, and their black servants, Robin, Polly, and Mary, which is a whole story about them. For example, Mr. Ford promised Robin Holmes that once they arrived in Oregon, they would be freed. Upon their arrival, Robin and Polly were freed, but they had to buy their children to free them. Yeah. Yeah. So they arrived in the Willamette Valley. Harris spent the winter there. He left the following spring with Elijah White, who was going east and wanted Harris to guide him. After Harris and White reached the Dalles, Harris decided to return to the Willamette Valley, but as he started back, he met Stephen Meek, who was seeking help for a party of settlers stranded in Central Oregon. The group had traveled south, trying to cross the Cascades using an old cutoff. They veered too far south and became stranded in the desert. Called the Blue Bucket Party because they picked up some nuggets, which were forgotten until gold was discovered in California. More than 20 people died in the desert before Moses Harris rescued them. He secured supplies from Indians and guided them back to the Dalles. So he remained in Oregon. Now, you have to understand, it was illegal for him to be in Oregon because he was black. But because he helped so many people in wagon trains, and what his agenda was, we need to keep Oregon, the Oregon Territory, from falling into British hands, so we need to bring more Americans here, and that's why he was down with the whole wagon train thing, bringing settlers into the Willamette Valley so that there would be more Americans than British. So, five civilized tribes you know about. Yeah.
How come all of the civilized tribes are like East Coast tribes?
Yeah.
None of those are West Coast tribes.
None of them are West Coast, right? Okay, so they're called that because they adopted ways that whites considered civilized: agriculture, slavery, having an alphabet, square houses, adopting Christianity. Though slaves were not beaten or put in chains, in many cases were allowed to intermarry without stigma, tribal members. This caused some whites to comment Indians didn't treat their slaves properly. So part of the thing that happened with the British definition, defining this as a problem, so Oregonians feared an alliance between blacks and Indians. So British officer, for example, suggested of Africans and Indians that they be forbidden from getting together because trouble ensues, which, you know, if the British troubles with the Maroons of Jamaica, right, you know, troubles in Mexico, right, Cuba, right, don't let them get together. So a Florida-type situation was never going to happen in Oregon because that was another one where the Seminoles fought off the British and got Florida away from the Spanish, then went to the British. Right? So a Florida-type situation was never going to happen in Oregon, but it was planned but never executed. The problem was there were 200 black people at the time of the exclusion laws. So, for example, so there is a historical precedent. Where is Mr. Thurston? Yes. Samuel Thurston, that the area of Springfield is named after, and the high school. American pioneer, lawyer, politician. He's the first delegate from the Oregon Territory to the U.S. Congress, and instrumental in the Donation Land Claim Act. I'm the kind of person that Samuel warned you against. He wrote an address to the Oregon legislature urging the prohibition of free African Americans from the Oregon Territory, which said, so the idea is this. If you remember your U.S. history, the Missouri Compact, the number of slave-owning states and the number of free states has to be equal. So you have to decide which way you're going to be on the slavery question. So Oregon was going to be a free state by banning black people altogether, based on this logic which he wrote. It is a question of life or death for us in Oregon. The Negroes associate with the Indians and intermarry, and if their free ingress is encouraged or allowed, there would a relationship spring up between them and the different tribes, and a mixed race would ensure, inimical to the whites. And the Indian, being led on by the Negro, who is better acquainted with the customs, languages, and manners of the whites than the Indian, these savages would become much more formidable than they otherwise would, and long bloody wars would be the fruits of the commingling of the races. It is the principle of self-preservation that justifies the action of the Oregon legislature. Oh, black people mixed with Indians. So that's why we're going to ban them. So, let's start with the territory. Copy that. Be it enacted by the Legislative Committee of Oregon as follows. No slavery forever in Oregon. If there are any slaves, they have 3 years to leave Oregon. If the owners of slaves don't remove them in 3 years, the slaves are freed. Wow, better and better. Any free blacks 18 years or older, or if males have 2 years to leave, females 3 years to leave. Okay, how do we leave? No Greyhound. Once you reach 18, you have 2 or 3 years to leave. If you don't leave, you shall be whipped 20 to 39 lashes. If you don't leave after you've been whipped, you will be whipped every 6 months until you do leave. If you are a slave who becomes free, then you have 2 or 3 years to leave. Passed in June of 1844. Christmas time, they had a change of heart. Replaces sections 6 and 7 whipping clauses. Now this is what Minister Farrakhan would call fiendishly clever. Any black who fails to leave can be arrested and, if found guilty, be sold to the lowest bidder for service to someone who agrees to remove them from the state within 6 months after that service expires. That person must post a bond of at least $1,000. And then this is before, all these are before the Constitution. So this is the Constitution. White foreigners have the same rights as native-born whites in Oregon. They were actually doing outreach to England and Germany to bring white immigrants here to become Oregonians, even though they weren't American citizens. Black American citizens of other states in the United States were forbidden to come to Oregon by its Constitution, and it was admitted to the Union on that basis. No slavery or servitude unless as punishment for a conviction. No blacks not residing in the state at the time of this Constitution can come, reside, buy property, or make contracts or sue in court. The legislature shall provide for the removal of all blacks from the state and punish those who bring, employ, or harbor them. And repealed in 1926. But blacks and Asians are not permitted to vote. No Asian can buy a property or mining claim or work a mining claim in the state. Copy that. So, to discuss the context of this, all right? In original position, you do not make a law against something that's not happening. It has to be happening already. So, these exclusion laws, they repeal the whipping clause, but then they institute what eventually becomes the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And it goes like this. We don't have slavery, so we're going to get rid of black people. And if you were a slave, you're free, but you have to leave in 2 to 3 years, or we'll whip you, or, and here's where the fiendishly clever part comes in, we can arrest you for being in the state. So you're no longer a slave, you're a criminal. And your crime is being in the state. So even if you own property or a business or land, we can arrest you. And then whoever arrests you, they can put you to work paying off the $1,000 bond that they posted to buy you, because we bought you at the lowest bidder, because slavery is about the highest bidder. So if the lowest bidder, it's not slavery. See the game? Now, if you understand what minimum wage is, you work a 12-hour day and you get paid 50 cents at the time. Okay? Which means it takes you 3 years to you do the math on that, 3 years to generate $1,000. 50 cents to $1, basically. All right? So part of the piece of where, you look at the prison industrial complex, okay, if we look at what happens, presaging what happens with the black codes in the South, oh, you're black and you own land, boom, you're under arrest. You try and vote, you're under arrest. And we'll work you on a chain gang. So the issue is not so much wrongdoing. Wait, I'm existing being a business owner? So the only person in the historical record apparently that was promoted was a black business owner from Salem who owned a saloon. All right, here are your midterms. They are due 1 week from today. And you can return them either in class or to my office, Building 1, 226.